you did a mission that took you to Siberia. When you first said that, I was kind of looking at you, through Zoom, trying to judge whether or not that was a joke. I got a friend who was talking about his mission and was talking about all these cool places all his buddies went. I said, "Where'd you go?" He's like, "Trenton, New Jersey." I'm like, "Oh no." That was my favorite one until you came along and told me Siberia. So you spent a couple of years in Siberia. What was that like? What did you learn?
Yeah, so that's a fascinating. It caught me off guard too. I mean, I would have been happy with Trenton, New Jersey too. So when you go on, so this is a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And when you submit your papers, they call it, they ask a number of questions, and one of them is your language proficiency, right? Do you speak any languages, right? And presumably it's because if you're going to serve in a different nation, you already kind of know that language. I was born and raised in Toronto, and so I studied French for 8 years. It's required. I spent a little bit more than the required number of years. I come from a family that my mother was a French teacher. Anyway, so I thought I'd go and serve somewhere French speaking. My sister got called to Paris, France, and my brother got called to Bordeaux, France, and I got called to Siberia, Russia, which this is back in, I got my mission call I served in 1995 through 97. I got it in 94, and this is before Google Earth, and so I pulled a map and figure out where Novosibirsk, Russia was, and realized that it was in Siberia. And so I'm from Canada, and so I should be pretty cold hardy, and I am to a certain degree. But yeah, I leave. You go to a 2-month-long intensive language training program in Provo, Utah. So I'm from Toronto to Provo, Utah, and then from there to Siberia, Russia. And my experience on my mission was, I think anybody would probably have similar comments, but you learn a lot about yourself, right? You're with a companion, so you learn how to live with somebody, whether you like that individual or not. You're living together, you're kind of assigned to live with, and it changes as time passes. But I developed some interpersonal skills where you can't pick your friends because you're with somebody that, and I liked all of my companions for the most part anyway, so it wasn't a real big issue. But massive development of interpersonal skills. Wasn't innately a patient person, became a much more patient person as a result of serving there. And then you just have a great deal of empathy for people and developing nations. And it's kind of weird to refer to Russia as developing nations. Obviously very developed in many ways, but in other ways it's probably still developing.
Right.
And I served there in the 95 through 97, so they had just kind of emerged from being in the Soviet Union, and so it was unique. It was like living in the Soviet Union, and it was it's Siberia, so is it cold? Yeah, it's wicked cold. I mean, the coldest it got when I was there was minus 40 degrees centigrade, which is where the centigrade and Fahrenheit scales cross. But that's without the wind chill factor. You layer in wind chill and it gets really, really cold. But the range is huge too. In the summertime, it's really quite warm there. Getting the mid 80s, pushing 90s, and so but much more humid than the Utah dry climate is. More like back east where I was raised. So I'm doing a terrible job of answering your question about leadership, but I kind of got a better feel for what are my weaknesses, what are my strengths, which if you're going to be a good leader, you need to be aware of your weaknesses and your strengths. You want to certainly leverage your strengths as best you can and do your best to make your weaknesses less apparent or develop those into strengths. And so I learned a lot about myself in that period of time, and then it kind of informed my interest going forward. I came back, I got a degree in international relations, wanted to work for the Canadian government and the Department of Foreign Affairs and International Trade, and didn't follow through completely with that, and eventually got into international business. And so I traveled all over the world before I came to Sunpro, specifically in Russia and Eastern Europe and the Middle East with a different company that was owned by Weyerhaeuser, an international paper. And so my international experience, or my experience in Russia, kind of opened my eyes to this world. And when I came back, I thought, I come from a family of dentists. I don't want to be a dentist. I want to travel the world and do it in an international business perspective or government. I kind of chose government, then I moved more towards business.